Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and if you're interested in tech leadership, this episode is for you. We cover the managerial path versus the individual contributor path, and what that path actually looks like from a technical perspective. How to adopt new technologies in bigger organizations, get buy-in and get things done. Both the pros of the new technologies as well as the downsides and what they could be. Joining me today and sharing his stories is Mirica, Senior Staff Engineer over at Molly, and I love the perspective he brings and the stories he shares. So enjoy. This morning I saw a post on LinkedIn, and it was funny because it was about LinkedIn. Now there's a little small tab that says videos, and this person was thoroughly against it based on research that has been done, platform like Instagram and TikTok, and short form video content or image content leads to endless scrolling, which is not good for the human brain. So then I'm wondering, is LinkedIn really incentivized to keep people on their platform and that's why they added video? Or do they plan to do some good with it? I feel like for bigger companies, that's always this discussion point, right? What is the purpose? And is it in the end good for people or not, or for profit?
I doubt anyone asks themselves if they're doing any good with it. It's really, I've noticed also a few, let's say, social features on LinkedIn lately. Mm-hmm. It has become a new social platform, a new social media platform.
Yeah.
I've read recently an article by Bruce Schneier, from the security expert Bruce Schneier. And his point there was that the biggest successful companies out there on the internet are all culture companies. They're not providing a service or selling wares, or what they are selling is culture.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, / Meta, everything Meta does, and now LinkedIn. And in fact, because culture has a wide appeal. So you get a lot of attention and eyeballs, and you get a lot of engagement, which then, of course, you monetize through ads, which is the de facto way of monetizing anything on the internet. So everyone that is in a position to pivot into that direction,
they will do so.
Probably will, because it's gonna be profitable for them.
Interesting.
Because what was LinkedIn selling the other day? They were selling recruitment services, let's say, right? They were selling tools for recruiters. They were selling this notion that, okay, you can reach talent and get talent into your organization, which is a valuable thing.
Yeah.
But that's like the size of that market
is finite.
It's peanuts compared to the culture space.
Yeah, that's fair. I wonder what it's then part to be within such an organization. Like you've been in way bigger organizations than I have. I work in consultancy and I go more in and out of organizations. But for example, booking, I was listening to this podcast and there was a guy on Lex Friedman's show, Peter Levels. I think he's a Dutch guy. He does a lot of indie startups. And he was also talking about Booking. That Booking was there to solve a problem. And now it's grown to this scale where in the end, it's also a bit slower as a total. But every part of it is like optimized and A/B tested for conversion, which I think in and of its own from an outside perspective is insane. What was it like kind of working on that platform from your perspective?
Well, it's very interesting. First off, it's the only very large company that I've ever worked for.
Yeah.
And that I know from the inside. And I've worked for it for 8.5 years. And I could say I worked for 3 companies in this time.
Okay.
Because the company has evolved a lot. When I joined, it was about 300 people in tech or so. And when I left, it was 2,500 people in tech. It's an insane growth.
Yeah.
And Booking, obviously very successful, world-renowned. If you look at the oral history of Booking, you read a little bit about it. It's actually on the internet, and it's told by people who were in leadership at those times.
That's cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Then you learn that its success is owed to a few key ingredients, a few decisions, and that, of course, snowballed into a massive thing. So one of them was what you're talking about, this hyper-optimization thing. So at some point in the history of Booking, someone decided to lead the company from a commercial product and tech perspective, not directly through, let's say, expert leadership or, consensually, democratically or whatnot, but through a tool.
Yeah.
And
data.
Data, yes. So you use data first and prove that your decision is in fact commercially successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so the teams, vast majority of teams and engineers within Booking used this tool to show that the changes that they are making are beneficial to the company. That's one thing. So that gave everyone a data validated, a scientifically proven kind of trajectory. And the second is take your hands off the steering wheel.
Okay.
Meaning that I, as an engineer, could decide for a good portion of my tenure in the company, could decide to go out there and change something that you as a customer would see on my own.
Oh, okay.
Completely autonomously. Of course, I mean, I'm a backend developer. I would need a designer. I would have to convince one of my designer colleagues to support me, one copywriter colleague to support me, etc. So we would make an autonomous team if we wanted to.
From bottom up.
Bottom up, we had an idea. We said, okay, we think that if we add this button here, it would convert better. Or
no product person that makes the decision, or
no, that was not required.
Okay,
it would have been smart of me to enlist a product person to help me with the product tasks, but I could take ownership of that and I could be my own product person.
Okay,
and then I would actually implement all of this, deploy it, test it for a couple of weeks, and show with data that my idea is legit.
Okay,
and we're talking about regular ideas, not things that could be affected by
not
regulatory.
Huge.
Oh, there were some huge changes that
Still?
were done. Back in the day, there were some huge changes that were done in the day. But we're talking really back in the day.
Yeah.
And those had immense impact. Like now they would be, in total over the years, they would be worth stupid amounts of revenue.
Was it incentivized to do this, or was it more the culture and kind of
It's a mix.
Okay.
So for a good part of my tenure there, if you were successful, if you did things right and you clearly benefited the company, you would definitely recognize this in terms of pay for performance.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Now this has changed, and this has changed throughout the industry over the last, let's say, 7 years. And there is, I would say, less how do you say this? Less emphasis on pay for performance, and there's much more base pay in general in industry.
Okay, so less peaks basically.
Sorry?
Less peaks.
Less peaks.
Yeah.
Yes, and less discretion from a manager. Of course, when you're running a 300-person team and you need to allocate individual bonuses, and you know everyone by name and reputation, it's one thing. When you're running a 2,000-person organization and you're trying to do the same thing, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, that's why you mentioned I worked for 3 different types of organizations. Yeah. Okay. And I'm assuming then the second type was kind of somewhere in between?
Yeah. It was very, very fast growing. And that meant that there was a lot of change all the time, and a lot of uncertainty all the time, and a lot of communication channels breaking down and being recreated in different ways and so on. So there was a lot of a transition period.
Interesting.
From
your side, why did you always, because I know you never left, let's say, hands-on work, or you're always more so involved where things are being built rather than high over managers would be. Why did you choose that path within this org and also still continuing?
Well, I generally believe that the managers have a tough job. So the managers, they need to make sure that the team is happy, that they are working well together, that roadblocks are being eliminated, that the paperwork is being done, and so on. And that's just not my expertise and not my thing, right, ultimately. And then there's not enough time to keep on doing the technical work. You cannot be a good, I cannot be, maybe some people can. I cannot be a good technical contributor and at the same time take care of the team and the people right? So there are teams in which the manager, there's a TL, for example, right? A team lead.
Yeah.
and they have very limited people responsibilities, and they basically approve holidays and make sure to have one-on-ones and things like that. But they also have a technical responsibility in the team. That works some of the time, but it's again a misalignment of incentives, because I, as an individual contributor, as an engineer, I can work on my career all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm delivering products, I'm expanding my skills, I'm making sure that I have a big network of a support network around me, and that helps me promote, that helps me in my career.
Yeah, depth.
Yeah. If I take on the TL role, now my mind space is occupied also by that.
Yeah.
But now I'm working on two paths. So I could promote from, let's say, an engineer to a senior engineer if I kept on going on the technical side, or I could invest more on the management side and then grow from a team lead to, I don't know, manager of software development or a director or whatnot. So someone responsible for multiple teams.
Yeah.
So this means that now I have to make a personal choice and to invest more of my time and energy in one of these paths. So it's kind of a robbery. You give me these responsibilities as manager, then it's in my best interest to immediately drop all of my technical responsibilities.
Yeah.
Because that's how I could accelerate my growth on the management track.
That's the new path.
That's the new path.
Yeah.
And that makes, I think it makes total sense for the individual. Now, from the company's perspective, of course, that means that you lose one headcount effectively. So you either compensate for that, or you try to trick the person into taking on this role that's kind of from a career growth perspective is at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
But they fill two roles for you as an employer. It's great from an efficiency, a cost efficiency perspective.
Cost efficiency, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a short-term thing. Like people who are very talented in either of these tracks, right? I think they will perceive it as a bad deal.
Okay, interesting. Like I'm contrasting this towards my own experience, because right now, like I'm in a consultancy company and we're experimenting with this team lead structure. So part of my time is allocated towards one-on-ones, indeed, more so personal happiness for consultants, and I don't have any insights into what type of client work they do. So this is more so the people management role. And then I have my client work. And I said yes to this because I'm kind of torn, right? I do see these as two separate career tracks. And I agree with you that there's going to be a decision on, I don't think this in-between stage is good, is healthy. I do think it's good for me to gain this experience and then see what I want to do from that aspect. But yeah, I do realize that if you have this mindset of, okay, I already know what I want to do, then it's a bad deal to split your time. Because split focus doesn't work.
If you want to try it out, then it's great. Especially if you're fortunate to be in a very fast growing company, then you are in a place where you can try out the management track. And if you like it and you get hooked on it, then you have an elevator ride because more teams are being formed all the time.
Priority.
You have priority. You have a place to be the leader of one team, but then you know that 3 teams are going to be formed next quarter, and they're going to pick to lead those 3 teams the person who has most experience, which is you now having the total of 4 months of experience. You're the best person we have.
Yeah.
But of course, with those 4 months of leadership experience also comes maybe 4 years of tenure in the company.
Of course.
So then that's a huge opportunity for people wanting to jump into management. So, and I've seen people jump into not the TL, but even the director level, straight from engineering, based on lots of tenure and a little bit of trial period here and there.
Yeah, interesting. And for you then, you already knew that this kind of people management track was not for you?
No,
which is why you decided not to do that?
It was not appealing, and so the direct people management was not appealing at all. And the paperwork, I'm just not equipped to do that. I would fail at it horribly. So, and I always had the autonomy that I needed to do my work and work on my projects, that I didn't really need that lever that management gives you, which is, I mean, of course, you decide where resources are allocated and you can give teams direction and so on. I never needed that because I could already do that through influence. So there was no appeal. Nobody ever stopped me from doing what I thought was right. Sometimes they had difficulty being convinced, and I needed to put in more effort, but that's fine. That just validates the idea. That's okay. But having this massive resource, so you have a whole structure of managers and teams and so on that works, and then you come in and you influence that structure into a certain direction. That's a huge boost of productivity for me.
Yeah,
because I don't have to actually think too much about, their happiness and environment and so on.
It's handled.
It's handled. Yes, it's provided as a service. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Interesting. What is this career path? So we're talking about the management track, and I know traditionally I have a good view of that specifically, but I'm curious from your perspective, what does this career track, let's say with depth and also more technical leadership, then look like? Because there are skills that overlap, I feel like.
Yeah, it depends a lot on what you want to do and the context, right? Because there are a lot of let's say traditional individual contributor careers. You see them more in specialized domains, like for example, security and networking, I think, where you have very, very, very strong experts. So they learn, they apply things at a higher and higher scale, but it's, as you say, more depth. It's less new initiatives and trying things out. It's more like, okay, at this level, at this stage of our company or our organization, we need to have this level of maturity of these solutions and so on.
Yeah. And those are usually the areas, right? Security,
those
networking.
are usually, exactly. These are traditional areas. Things are quite well settled, and they are very, very demanding in terms of quality.
Yeah.
But the innovation space is smaller, unless you're at a very big corp and you're rolling your own software-defined networks like at Google and so on. Then it's
trailblazing.
Then it's very different.
Yeah.
But then if you're in product development, or I was more in infrastructure, but at the edge between infrastructure and applications. Right?
Okay, so
closer to the application side. But I was also a database administrator. But as a database administrator, of course, you're interacting directly with the application.
Yeah, it can have huge impact.
Especially from a reliability perspective, you can have huge impact.
Yeah.
So then you can take this path of becoming an expert. Then you become a database engineer or a security architect, etc. Or you can go for more breadth. Breadth could mean business acumen. So you're an application engineer, but you know very well the business, the industry. And then, of course, you can contribute from a directly commercial perspective. So you're now finding solutions to business problems, or you're finding that there's new technology and then you use your own creativity to apply it to a certain business direction. Yeah. So that's very, very lucrative. For example, in my previous job, this was the case for data science and machine learning. Or you can try to introduce new technology. So this is basically opening up new avenues for the company. So you can, it could be based on hype, like now with AI, everybody's trying to find a problem for the new AI tools that are available.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes successfully. And then the skills that you need to grow are very much more people skills, because you need to influence people. You need to convince people to help you. You need to convince people that it's a good idea. You need to make a very good, compelling argument about the ideas that you have and so on. And then, it kind of blends it a little bit with people management, because like 80% of what we do is dealing with other people. If you're a small startup of a few individuals, then most of the time you spend coding and building products.
Yeah.
When you're in a large company, most of the time you're trying to stay out of other people's ways and try to influence or make room for the thing that you need to accomplish.
Yeah, still make it happen.
Yeah, still make it happen. That's the most part of the job. The coding, it's a small part of the job. That's considered the easy part.
Yeah.
Right. The hard part is to arrange all of the elements in such a way that out comes a product that's still usable for the customer, and your team gets what they need, and the other teams get what they need, because the relationships between teams matter a lot. So you cannot make sure that it happens for you at the expense of someone else.
Yeah.
Usually that's really bad for.
Usually, yes. I think of this from my own perspective, and this year I made a decision to take up an assignment as product manager, product owner, product manager. The roles are kind of interchangeable at this org. They say product owner is more technical, which I think is pretty funny. But in any case, and it's mainly because of that autonomy and decision-making power that you mentioned, right? If I had that more as an engineer, then maybe I wouldn't have switched to this role to see what it would look like to be fully responsible or more responsible than I was previously. And now I notice indeed skills like communication, getting buy-in, solving people problems. Those are things I excel more and more at just by virtue of doing it more often, right? That's the experience I gain here. And I definitely miss the implementation side. So for me now with this learning, I feel like the ideal role would be to be more of a product engineer where you have that business acumen and you're also there with a certain level of autonomy and business power or decision-making power to actually drive change and also implement it. And then still the implementation is like this, I don't know, this fulfillment, which is more personal, where I actually feel like I contribute and not just kind of overarchingly see and plan and prioritize and other people contribute. Like I feel like I'm not doing as much of the work as other people, but then people appreciate that you are in this position. That's kind of your role, right? You are the orchestrator. So that's how I now see my path towards the future. Have you ever been in a position where you drove change within the organization just by virtue of you having that autonomy and decision-making power from your position?
Yeah. So on a number of occasions, I've autonomously or bottom-up introduced technology. Usually within a group of people. So we decided to try something out.
Okay.
So
based on what? Just based on what was new, or
based on what was new and what was interesting to us, and based on opportunities that already existed in the company. So, for example, around 2016 to 2017 at Booking, there was a lot of data available for data science purposes.
Yeah.
But it was exploited in a quite naive way, let's say. So traditional querying and reporting of it. And there was no strong tool for doing data science at the time. So a colleague of mine and myself, we found this, it was back then a relatively new project called Apache Spark.
Oh, yeah?
It was, yeah. and we decided to just try it out. So being engineers, it was trivial for me to just get the library, install it, and connect it to the cluster and run some jobs on it and see what it spits out.
Perfect.
So for me, it was trivial.
Yeah.
For the 100 or so data scientists around, this was earth-shattering.
Yeah, right.
So for them, they had no skills, no knowledge, no access, no way.
They couldn't make it happen.
They couldn't make it happen. So then we decided, okay, this is interesting. Of course, I'm an engineer. I can query data, but ultimately, how useful am I going to be?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to be of much use because I'm not a data scientist.
Not compared to the hundreds of data scientists. No. Yeah.
So we made a decision and an informal deal with two of our colleagues, data scientists, that we will support this project. So the installation, upgrades, making everything work fine. We will support it. And they will have to train and get all of the data scientists to use it.
Yeah.
And that happened. And then within about a year or so, we collected other teams that also had similar initiatives. So one of them had an initiative in deep learning with image tagging. And another team had another initiative in data science proper. And we created a track, so a collection of teams under one leadership to provide machine learning services to the greater organization.
Yeah.
So this ballooned a lot over the years. But it basically started with two people saying, okay, it would be really cool if we could use this new tool. I mean, we are data rich, we are compute capacity rich. We can make something out of it. We can definitely experiment with it on company money and time.
Yeah.
So why not? And then signing up more people to actually use it. And because without signing up the data scientists, you don't have a business case, right? You just have a toy tool that you can use and show off, but you don't have a business case. You're not actually delivering value.
Yeah.
But by enlisting these people and organizing them a little bit and organizing trainings and offering these resources, then basically you are reshaping a large organization and how they work every day.
Interesting.
And I mean, my contribution to this was just the pushing, the kick in the butt that it needed. And then, of course, it snowballed and a lot more people were engaged.
I mean, you had the right skills to get it up and running. And then that probably that people side of it, that business acumen, that's what got people buy-in towards the vision.
I was able to convince. So that's the thing. A lot of people have the skills. If you ask them make this work on this computer, they are much better suited than I am. What I brought to the table, or the critical skill that I have that helps me do this kind of job, is convincing other people to help me. It works very very
I can
well.
see that smile. Yeah.
It works very well. It works scary well. Yeah. And of course, I sell a story in which you are going to gain out of this, right? So this is the story that if you do this, you train these people, you are going to be at the forefront of this new technology. So you will be well known in this community, which is obviously beneficial to you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of credit here. I'm not doing this for my own credit or gain.
Yeah.
So you're the front person for this stuff. But obviously it's a win-win situation. And it works.
Convincing people.
80% of the time it works, 100% of the time, yeah. Yeah.
Convincing people is a powerful skill. And I feel like it might be underestimated. Like I like the art of having a discussion. I was very stubborn, I think, early in career. I still think I am stubborn, but I've learned to be flexible, right? I can be convinced. Let's just have a good conversation and see what the arguments are. And I feel like that flexibility and still persuasion power, like story and a vision that still all will contribute towards persuading someone, especially people with, let's say, that don't have the skills to get something up and running from an engineering perspective, like data science, or people that are completely non-technical, but do have business acumen from a business side. Yeah. I think it's very powerful from an individual contributor standpoint, especially when you have that, let's say, decision-making power or autonomy to make those decisions. But before we go into more how you did it, specifically, I'm interested in the environment that cultivates that, because you said, okay, we had an idea, more so up and coming technology with a vision, and with the environment that we have, we could see this, right? And we can make the decision to do this experiment. All of that just makes it seem like you woke up, had this idea and just did it. But there needs to be time, there needs to be an environment to be able to do so, right?
Yeah, obviously. No, I mean, I did wake up and I just did it. But what I'm not factoring in is that like the other 10 years of organization building that I was on the shoulders of others when I did that, right? So I kind of landed on the shoulders of others. I also participated in building things. But yes, it's true. There's a special kind of environment that allows these things to happen. And it's an environment where bottom-up solutions and initiatives are appreciated. At the very least, they're not hindered. It's an environment where all ideas and all perspectives are, at the very least, welcome, but also quite a lot of constructive criticism is like, some vigorous conversations happen all the time.
Yeah, but a productive one.
Most of the time. So even though the conversations can become a little bit emotional, it's very important that there's a lot of psychological safety.
Yeah.
So even if the ideas are criticized ruthlessly, it's very important that at the end of the day, we have trust in each other, that we want the best, or on a personal level, we want the best for each other, right?
Yeah.
Because in a very fast-growing organization, for example, that trust gets eroded. You have teams that are very far away from one another and they don't see each other's perspectives. And you also have engineers with very little tenure and so no track record between each other. And it's very difficult to establish those relationships. So if you have more of a hacker ethos with a small team that have been together for a little while and they have a very good goal in mind, right? They are all aligned towards a larger goal. Then it's possible to have these vigorous conversations on topic, even though, I mean, we're computer nerds, we fight over crazy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like which editor is the best. So of course you do that, but that does not lead to judgment for the other person.
Yeah.
So that's very important. So having this high degree of psychological safety is very important. Then of course having a talented team helps a lot. And here the thing is that it's usually a strategic decision. If you build your company with a strong focus on insourcing things, then you have more work to do for experts in different fields.
Okay.
If you choose to externalize, for example, you choose to host on cloud, then you have no reason why you would have a 6-person networking team.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so you don't have those skills. You don't have those skills at all anymore. So you have no reason to employ those people. You're robbing yourself of a talent pool that could be a multidisciplinary talent pool that could help you in other areas of your company, right? So many companies choose to externalize a lot of their skills in the end, and so they invest more in industry expertise, but they rob themselves over this multidisciplinary, right? So they don't hire, physicists, mathematicians, chemists. I worked in a team. So I worked in a team with 2 surgeons.
Okay.
So I was the safest person in the office because I literally had 2 medical professionals that were both software developers now.
Okay.
On either side. And of course they bring a different perspective to things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I mean, from my side, I love working in the cloud. It's because me as an individual, I have less total cost of ownership, right? I don't have to think about things like storage networking, scalability, elasticity. It's all out of the box there. And I think the majority of organizations, that just makes sense indeed. And when you get to a point scale-wise and where you can do more and can afford to, because you just have, I think, the capital to do so, bring that back and indeed kind of internalize that knowledge, then possibilities open up. But it's a bigger risk as well at the end of the day, because a lot of things have to come together in the right way to actually execute or be able to execute on the benefit there, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, it's important to be successful first,
Yeah.
right? So once you are successful, but then you still have to have the right ideas. So even though you're making lots of revenue, you still have to have the right ideas and recognize that, okay, from here to the next step, we need to change a bit. It's not enough to find the widget to sell and be successful in selling that one widget. We now have to create this new organization that innovates and invents and so on, that goes beyond the pre-made building blocks, the Legos that the SaaS space and the cloud space offers us.
Yeah. Do you think it's the right ideas or also just the ability to experiment with many ideas in a fast-paced environment?
But just the idea that you need to create that freedom for yourself, that's in itself
that's
a difficult learning to have, right? Because the thing is, as an organization, you learn how to be successful in your own paradigm. To change an organization, that's a different skill.
Absolutely.
And usually organizations resist this.
Yeah. It's a very long process to change an organization. Yeah. That's why I'm so fascinated by this environment where ideas pop up bottom up, right? It's not often that I hear that. I hear preach and ideas that this is what we want, but to be able to have that, I think, is a different ballgame. From an individual contributor side, do you get time for that, or how is this facilitated? Let's say by the environment.
Yeah, well, I prefer, and in my case, it's also an internal perspective. Within my career, generally, it's I could just take time and do it. Yeah, right. So there's no risk, but internally in my head there is risk, right? Because I am taking time. I am held accountable for what I did with that time. Yeah. Or I could be wasting time, and even worse, I could be wasting other people's time. That's another topic. So if you create an environment where individuals are allowed to do this, but they're not, let's say, they're incentivized, but it's not advertised that they should do this. Yeah. Then you have self-selection. So a few who are risk-taking believe in their idea and they think internally that they need to work hard to make it happen, they will show up, right? They will see the door. They're like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see what's behind door number 1. Oh, wait, there's a void here. I can build my own thing. Okay, fine, do that. Then from externally, you monitor and you look at it. You say, okay, they're onto something. Okay, fuel the fire a little bit.
Yeah.
Or give them a little bit of coaching if they're causing a mess, which I've done in the past, of course. They're causing a mess. Okay, let's clean the mess around them a little bit and help them put a bit of structure. Like, for example, in the story about machine learning, there was, at some point, a lot of structure was put together to make things efficient and orderly, and so that people are no longer confused about who's running what and why, which it was the case before. And there's only a small number of initiatives that are actually gonna happen like this at the larger scale. At the smaller scale, if we're talking about experimentation, A/B testing, and having bottom-up product ideas, then that can happen within the team. So within the regular conversations, products to engineers and so on, you need to really listen to what everyone is talking about, and you really need to ask everyone, okay, what do you think about this, and so on. And then you're going to have seeds from that. And of course, not everyone is going to go out and pitch their idea, but if you can extract the idea as a product owner or product manager, and always start from the perspective of everyone has valuable ideas and we should really analyze each one of them with equal merit, then you're going to get, okay, well, actually, that's a good point. Okay, let's put it in the next sprint or the one after that.
Yeah.
And that's how you extract bottom-up ideas and you get to the implementation. And people are very, very happy to discover that 2 weeks later, they're working on something that they just blurted out in the last brainstorming session. They're really proud about that and excited to work on it. And of course, that becomes a flywheel of motivation and performance of the teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective and insight. I'm also wondering, when it comes to those bigger, let's say, structural changes, especially when it comes to new tooling and technology, adoption is fine if the tooling at the end of the day has that longevity that you aim for, right? But with new technology, they pop up sometimes like mushroom. And if you choose to adopt it, especially with an organization, and at the end of the day, something better pops up or something just actually doesn't work out towards the vision that you had, it can have pretty severe consequences as well. Is there any experience you've had with, let's say, advocating for a new adoption of a technology where things didn't end up the way you wanted it to?
Yeah. In fact, I have an example of that. So also a long time ago, a few colleagues of mine and myself, we started playing with containerized infrastructure. So we got a hold of something called Mesos, I think.
Okay.
It became later on Apache Mesos. And it's an old orchestrator, a bit more visual, a bit more like VMware, let's say. It was okay. Obviously, it was far less powerful than what Kubernetes is now, but this was pre-Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, this is interesting. This is a way for us to run, well, initially toy workloads on a cluster. So we set up a cluster. We started playing with it. I started researching a little bit about, okay, what is containerization? What is it good for? Why this new paradigm? Right? I mean, obviously, I understand why this would be useful in a, let's say, virtualized environment, like in a cloud environment or Lambda.
Yeah.
Okay, you can run tons of things over so much metal, so it's efficient. It's an efficiency thing. But beyond the efficiency thing, what I found was that it allows the developer to self-serve to hardware resources, just like in a cloud environment. Obviously, we were on an on-prem environment, managed servers, managed by ourselves, but still, from the application developer to the servers, there was a long chain of communication, approvals, budgeting, planning, setup, and so on. So it was very difficult for an application engineer to create a new flavor of application. It was very easy for them to scale up an application or down or whatnot. That was relatively easy. But for them to create a new flavor, that was very difficult. And there was an appetite within the organization for being able to spin up new Java services, for example, and new toy services and so on.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this is quite interesting. So this actually allows us to put effectively an API in front of limited hardware capacity.
Okay.
And then offer this as a service to application engineers, and then they self-serve and host their applications within this. So this is a paradigm shift. Now, my mistake was not adopting this initiative as my own and dedicating my whole time to it, because I was engaged with something else at the time. But what I did in what I thought was support to the existing team was to explain this idea and paradigm in a blog post.
Okay.
In a medium-sized blog post, internal, to say, okay, this is a new way of thinking about this. We can offer you this, and you will get this thing, this API, and this world where you can expand and install your applications and offer them to our customers ultimately.
Yeah.
Of course, on the backdrop of experimentation and everything that would happen anyway. Mm-hmm. So I posted this and, left for holiday. After a period of time, this caught people's attention and it caught management's attention.
Okay.
Of course, I think the backstory is that people in the application space, they were very thirsty for this, and they pushed management into, maybe this is a good idea. Could you make it happen? Yeah, this is what we need. They were very, very thirsty for this degree of freedom. From the infrastructure perspective, nobody really was aware or cared about this much because, of course, they were still doing their thing that they knew they needed to do for years. And so this perfect storm happened where management decided to, make a run for it. Mm-hmm. And they put together a number of teams with very little guidance in the end, because we didn't know what we even wanted. This is a blue ocean idea. Put together these teams, gave them the mandate to just build it, whatever it is. Yeah. And they really, really struggled, right? So they got between a rock and a hard place. They got between excited and eager management and thirsty and eager
also users.
Internal users. They were really between a rock and a hard place, and it was not a pretty picture. A lot of people ultimately did not appreciate my efforts to popularize this idea. Okay, and I think ultimately, it's a big mistake of mine to have tried to popularize an idea without giving the necessary support or guidance or toning down the expectations of people around me.
I can see that learning because, you said one of your strengths is that persuasiveness, right? So you probably saw the appetite for it, which is then absolutely leverage that you're going to use to get an idea through, and you wholeheartedly believed in that vision, I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, of course I believed it's useful. Yeah. But I didn't think they were going to take it this far. I thought that I didn't think anything. Later on, I thought oh my God, I would have expected you to be more reasonable about things. You cannot expect everything to just show up.
Fall into place.
This is brand new. Kubernetes didn't exist. Yeah. So, right. But that's hindsight. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it doesn't matter because I'm responsible for what I think and what I say and what I do. The reactions of other people, I shouldn't have expected them to react in a particular way. I should have made sure that they understand, okay, this is just experimentation. We just try things out. This is a possibility. This is why it's worthwhile our time. But don't get too excited. But I didn't do that, of course. And that was a huge mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that learning. I can definitely see how that can escalate quickly, right? And eagerness from both sides, management and from a user base. Yeah. And a team in the middle puts basically a high stake pressure environment really at play there.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry about it, really, because it's the worst thing. Like, if I cause an outage, which I've done many times, right? If I cause a technical problem,
Yeah.
that doesn't really hurt anyone. Well, in my current job it might, but in my previous job it didn't. It just meant a bit of loss of revenue.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's part of the rules of the game.
It's still a terrible feeling from your perspective. Yeah.
It's a terrible, somewhat exciting feeling. Yes, it is a bad feeling. It depends on what happened, right? But when you hurt people that you have to show up and look them in the eye the next day, but anyone really, strangers as well, then it really hurts. Then you really get put down a bit. You get humbled.
Yeah, but things. I mean, from my perspective, I'm an outside perspective. It feels like you have a big sense of ownership, because to attribute that to like you starting a flame and then other people really fanning this flame, like it's a collective fault. I feel like also within that organization. If the idea and also the execution turned out to be right, then everyone would be celebrating, right?
Yeah,
but
of
it is
course.
because it went this way that's the learning there.
Yeah, of course, but that's the case for everything. Like all accidents have good intentions. Like, unless you're, okay, we're not gonna talk about people who intentionally cause harm, right? Yeah. But every time that you do cause harm inadvertently, of course you have to take responsibility for that. Even if, for example, it's an incident, we do postmortems for incidents, and it's very, very important to take responsibility for it. That doesn't mean that you need to be punished for it. You're punishing yourself well enough by just saying, okay, I'm definitely gonna try not to do that again. That's enough. But it's really important to get the learnings, because otherwise anything is excusable. Then any kind of risk-taking activity becomes excusable through this lens of saying, well, but if it turned out all right, then everybody would have been happy. Well, but then I can push it really far, right? With risk-taking. Yeah, and that's where you get into breaking the law for the benefit of profits, for example. Because you go, oh, but I mean, obviously, if we can skirt this regulation and become successful, then everybody's going to be happy. Well, yes, but that's not the right thing to do. And you should have learned that a few steps prior.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. I've seen things when an incident happen in twofold, like you describe it, where people really take to heart those learnings. And also we accept that mistakes happen and we move on, right? Or where all of a sudden we say, okay, our risk appetite might have been too broad, and then processes come in place, and then all of a sudden that autonomy and decision-making power gets taken away. And even then, like, it can happen with reason, or it can happen completely the other way, where all of a sudden you're like, okay, we can't do anything anymore. And I see organizations lean more and more towards sometimes taking away or putting in processes too much or too quickly. And then when processes are just too much, you lose this kind of experimentation or that freedom and autonomy. And I think it has to be a trade-off, right? Not every company is bank, so the risk appetites can vary. And you need to make a conscious decision in what to adopt process-wise and how freedom or how autonomous people can be.
Indeed. But I think there's a modern tendency towards safety through internal rules, rather than safety through incentives and this taking responsibility and acting as an individual in the best interest of the organization. This is, I think, also because, or one of the contributing factors is that individuals feel more safe, psychologically safe, if it's rules-based. The other way is much more personal, and it's easy to perceive this responsibility that falls on you in a difficult way, right? So it's a way of protecting engineers, protecting people from fallout. And that allows you to have a larger, less experienced organization with less friction, with less people work inside that organization, because everything is laid out and you cannot cause an incident because there are all of these rules in place that prevent you from causing that incident, right? So this means that you're excused from explaining yourself. Why did you do from A to M that caused the incident, because you should stop at B.
Yeah, that's the process.
Yeah, there's a control there that stops you. Now, of course, this has a cost to agility and so on. And within an organization, you need to find a balance between putting these controls in place. I mean, I work now in a regulated entity, so we have to have these controls.
Yeah.
Yes. So but the thing is that the controls need to provide the safety, real safety, not safety that the auditor sees and they check the box. No. So the control has to provide real safety. And at the same time, the control has to have a very good story for how the agility of the team is preserved. Or what measures we took internally to make sure that the agility of the team is preserved. Because if you just slap on controls over a system that was not meant to have them. So for example, you commit code straight to the repository and deploy it straight to production, and there is no control. That's what startups routinely do.
Oh yeah.
Then every engineer is empowered to build a feature and deploy it and test it in production with some users and roll it back. Okay. Now you become a regulated entity, for example, and you need to slap on a control. You need to have a 4 eyes principle, for example, and you need to have some change management for production. You can no longer create production database tables directly.
Yeah.
Okay, now as an engineer, I can only test on my local machine. So I have no way to test anymore. Now the company is losing agility.
Yeah.
It's very obvious. So we need to invest in mitigating that loss. It's very important not to skirt the regulation, so don't create the control just for show, but mitigate the impact and, create pre-production environments or create a way for engineers to test changes potentially in production, but without full deployment. So divorce deployment from release with feature flags or experimentation. So you need to do these investments in order to regain the agility. And then at the end of the story, if you're successful, then you're going to have the cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
It's going to cost.
Yeah, that's the best part. I feel like with that mindset, because controls are easy, right? You slap a control on it, but that can have tremendous side effect, not just in way of working and productivity and agility, but also sense of fulfillment and honestly just happiness, right? If you work in the sandbox environment as an individual, it doesn't feel as good as when you can experiment more so with actual users, right? They say that when this chain of you solving something and then it actually landing to the end user is very long, then that usually correlates with people kind of losing sense of what they're doing. And then also, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned this feeling of doing the best for the organization. That's something that I felt very strongly. Like I started out in operations, and when I heard from, honestly, my product manager or whomever, we needed to do something, and I thought it genuinely didn't make sense. Like I could not just stop there and do it, basically. It was always bothering me. So I escalated, or I would make sure that the right people would be at the table to have that discussion, regardless on if I was right or wrong, but I needed to be convinced that this is indeed the right thing for the organization. I've realized in practice that not everyone thinks like that, and therefore some controls are better in place. But I think it's very dangerous also when people of, let's say, higher decision-making power or levels of autonomy don't have the best of the company like at their heart. And you see strange decisions being made, especially when you're from that role of individual contributor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
Yeah. But
you don't want to see that at all.
No,
and it's extremely damaging. So when we're talking about the population of individual contributors that are exposed to decisions by senior leadership that don't make sense, the feeling of demotivation is very, very intense. Yeah, it's a situation that you want to avoid as much as possible. And here, like two things to avoid that would be, it's very important to be able to explain and to answer any question about a decision, a high-level decision, especially a strategic decision, and be open about it and be able to explain to everyone involved why you chose that. I'm okay even with explanations that are not maybe so objective,
Yeah.
right?
What you want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay, as long as you're open to explaining it and you're clear about it.
I mean, then we can disagree and commit. Still.
Yeah, then we disagree and commit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because you can make an argument, especially in technology, you can make an argument for either or,
Yeah.
right? So
Subjective.
you choose between cloud providers. It's very easy to choose either or. Any one of them is reasonable,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, large successful companies use all of them, right?
Yeah.
So if you choose between one or the other, then you should be able to say, well, it's because of this reason, or this technical reason, or this business strategic reason, or this financial reason, or whatnot.
Yeah.
Because if not, then it's not a credible
What else?
decision.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the downfall of that is that a lot of people that are witness to that, they're going to be extremely demotivated. So yeah, avoid.
I agree. I was wondering how to prevent that. And I agree that when it happens, the communication and the clarity is like paramount. Without it, you're going to lose a lot of trust and a lot of motivation there. But I'm wondering from your perspective, then also what you've seen, does, let's say, a higher leadership, people that are not on this technical leadership path, but more on the traditional managerial path, do they need to have any experience with software engineering? Or what have you seen with people that have had that experience versus the people that don't have any experience?
Well, I've seen great managers in both sides of the camp, right? So I've seen great managers that come from very different backgrounds that cannot code to save their life.
Yeah.
They are still, they're still productive with the computer, right? We're not talking about people who are not fit in that space, right? But they are not software engineers, but they're great managers. They are very much people-oriented or business savvy. They're smart people. They're very, very successful as well.
Yeah.
And of course, there are engineers who chose the management path. And well, by the time that you see them as directors or VPs or whatnot, of course, many of them have not touched code in a long time. So you might see them as rusty. Some of them, if you look in their background, have contributed to interesting pieces of internet infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed pool. But I don't think that it's necessary for a manager in the IT industry to have a software development or IT background necessarily at all. As long as they're passionate about what they're doing, and they are a good fit for the organization. That also matters a lot.
Yeah.
Because a manager to give an example, Amazon, infamous management culture example in Amazon, is not going to be a fit in Spotify. Neither the other way around. But they are individually very successful in their own organizations as long as they are a good fit for there. And it's the same thing for developers, for software engineers, for any other employee. If you're a good fit for the organization, even though from the outside it might look like, okay, that organization, I never want to work there. There's still thousands of people working in that organization, and many of them being very successful. So there's no reason to throw rocks at them. It's just, everybody likes their own game.
Yeah. I mean, they also help form that, right? Even if you are new and you join the leadership team immediately, it helps form part of now the new organization.
Yeah.
So that's why if you do a complete swap initially, then those organizations don't make sense with those leadership teams. But I think if you would do it gradually, then the organization will change.
Yeah, but there's a strong. There's a strong organ rejection.
Exactly. If it's a complete
reflex.
mismatch, if it's the DNA doesn't blend, then then it doesn't work.
There is a strong organ rejection, and it's very difficult to navigate this. Organizations do need to evolve, but people within the organizations have their own ideas about the direction that they would prefer to evolve, and sometimes it doesn't match with what happens in reality.
That's fair.
So if you're talking about should we hire new leadership from a particular background or from a particular company because we want to be more like that, you can.
Yeah.
But there's a responsibility on both sides to make that transition smooth. And there's also a responsibility on your side to explain internally in your organization why it's a beneficial shift towards a more like that. If you try to do this in a covert way or without any planning at all, then I predict sparks.
Oh yeah, from history and experience, I felt some sparks indeed. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I must say, before we round off, is there anything you still want to share? We talked about technical perspective, leadership, I think driving ideas, getting buy-in on the people's side as well as the technical side.
Yeah, maybe if you find yourself in a position of influence or leadership in a company, I think the best thing you can do to serve your company is to promote systems and rules and incentive structures that you can easily explain to someone without them needing to be in the room when the decision is being made. So if you can make it so that you can explain the rules of the game to someone outside of the room, and then they can work it out to, okay, if this is how decisions are being made, then I'm confident that they're made, that they are solid. Even though I don't know the arguments because of reasons, I'm not privy to those arguments, but I know that the employees' perspectives were taken into account, or whatever it matters to them. Then you're going to have a much easier time with convincing people to row in the right direction.
Interesting. That really hits home, because I feel like when decisions were made and I don't know what process or what led to that decision, that's when I feel pain and where I see friction or where I'm extra critical. But when I do trust the process, it's different.
So it's very important that the process is credible. Because people are, especially in medium, large organizations, people are not privy to a lot of the details of the decisions. So a good example is promotion processes. A promotion process that is manager discretion is not really a credible system. Because there is all sorts of incentives, right? The managers are incentivized to have their reports happy. And so there's an incentive to promote early, to give an example, right? So all sorts of things. So if you set up a system where the process is credible, then you're going to have a much, much easier time to explain the outcome.
I love that. All right, we're going to round it off here. Thank you so much for listening. If you're still here, leave a like, leave a comment, let us know what you thought, and we'll see you on the next one.